Opening in 2000, Superman the Ride has been considered legendary status ever since. The ride has won the Golden Tickets Award for Best Steel Coaster 5 times. This roller coaster has been on my bucket list for as long as I knew about this coaster. Finally, now in 2019, I took the journey up to Six Flags New England to ride this allegedly amazing coaster. After getting multiple rides on Superman the Ride, I'm ready to provide my in-depth review of this now classic intimate hypercoaster. Presentation. When Superman the Ride opened to the public in 2000, the ride was originally called Superman Ride of Steel, and in Six Flags fashion, the name was also used on 2 other intimate hypercoasters at different parks in the chain. The other 2 Ride of Steel coasters are clones of each other, while this Superman ride is its own unique layout. In 2009, Superman the Ride was renamed and rethemed to Bizarro, which is a counterpart evil clone of Superman. Many coaster enthusiasts didn't seem to be too enthusiastic with the ride change, thus resulting 6 years later the ride was rethemed back to Superman as Superman the Ride, which is a better fit. During the Bizarro years, the ride was painted purple and blue, and some effects were added to the ride. The middle row of each Superman train was ripped out and replaced with an inboard audio system, which didn't last long and didn't make it through the transition back into Superman. Instead of placing the seats back in the train, they just have an empty space. Superman has some neat little themings here and there, mostly just giant posters or billboards that display facts and trivia about Superman and his various villains. A nice little touch, there's a sign you can view while sitting on the brake run that says Superman has defeated Bizarro, thus reinstating Superman's reign in the park. During the ride, there are a few things scattered around to enhance the whole atmosphere of the ride. The neatest interaction is the multiple outlines of the Superman logos that the ride pierces right through. There is some lighting and mist effects also used throughout the ride, just enough to add a little more excitement to this roller coaster. The Spaghetti Bowl section of the ride has a lot of foliage that has grown in nicely with the ride. The whole Superman area of the park is the best looking area of the park in my opinion. Superman fits nicely right alongside the Connecticut River. The view from the top of Superman boasts a great view of the park and the surrounding area. Superman the Ride earns a 10 rating for presentation. Ride intensity. From what I heard by other coaster nerds, I was expecting Superman to feature more floater airtime and high-speed turns similar to Superman Ride of Steel, or even Millennium Force, somewhat. Well, my expectations were exceeded. Superman the Ride is a forceful roller coaster that has great airtime, including both floater and ejector airtime. The ride also has a couple gray out moments, including the overbank turn and one of the helixes near the end of the ride. After ascending 208 feet into the air, riders take a 221-foot plunge back to Earth and dive through a tunnel. If you are sitting in the back row, the first drop gives you some decent ejector air. After completing the first drop, you are then sent right into a fun floater-filled airtime hill. I think near the front, the train is more aggressive, but regardless where you sit, expect some decent extended airtime. The overbanked turn has some decent positive Gs, and this is one of the moments of the ride where I started to gray out. The ride then levels out and takes a small bunny hill of sorts down into the ravine before popping up into yet another airtime hill. This one is mostly floater airtime, but the airtime hill that comes after delivers the strongest negative Gs on the whole ride. Regardless of where I sit, I'm being thrown out of my seat with some excellent ejector airtime. Superman then starts the first helix in the Spaghetti Bowl area. The first helix delivers some good positive Gs, but then the hill that transitions you into the next helix has some fun airtime moment. The ride then completes a helix, dives down through a tunnel, setting you up for 3 consecutive airtime hills. Depending on where you are seated, they range from decent floater to a couple pops of ejector air. The ride then performs one last turn before shooting you into the brake run. When you are watching Superman from the pathway, it looks like Superman doesn't have much life left in it, especially after the final airtime hills, but when you're on this thing, you feel like you're come flying in at full speed. I always love a ride that comes cruising in, especially when the coaster has smooth magnetic brakes to bring you to a halt. After riding this coaster multiple times, I'd say that the back is the best place to ride. I just love how this ride yanks you over the first drop. It's not as intense as like El Toro's first drop, but still a great moment of airtime. Superman the Ride is the complete package, delivering great moments of intensity and thrills. I'm giving Superman a score of 10 for ride intensity. Fun factor. Rating the fun factor for this coaster is actually quite challenging. There is one aspect of this ride that I haven't talked about that really affects the overall experience, and that's the restraints. Similar to other Intamin hypercoasters, Superman utilizes a seatbelt lap bar combination. Unfortunately, it's the lap bar that's not the greatest. Because I'm a taller person, the lap bars come down on my thighs instead of closer to my lap. If you don't situate yourself correctly, the restraints can be very painful. What was going to be my last ride on Superman turned into a very painful experience. The ride operator stapled me into the seat and was crushing my thighs. The way the lap bar is shaped, it's like a small point that presses into your thighs, so every airtime moment was painful, and honestly, I just wanted the ride to end. I couldn't let that be my last experience on Superman, so I hopped on again, and this time I had a better experience. I noticed that the second row of any car is a little tighter in space than the front row of each car, so I recommend riding in the first row of any car. So if you want to ride in the back of the train, don't pick row 17, go with row 16. This might not be an issue for everyone. My wife didn't mind the restraints, but she is considerably shorter than I am. Beyond the flawed restraints, Superman the Ride delivers an excellent experience. In some ways, I'd like this ride more than Wicked Cyclone. Obviously, Wicked Cyclone is the better coaster, but Superman is more aggressive and intense. Every airtime moment is fun, making it hard for me to narrow down my favorite moment of this ride. If I'd had to pick, it'd be that third airtime hill just before diving by the station. It has some of the best airtime on the whole ride. Because of the restraints, I'm knocking off a couple points, giving Superman a score of 8 for the fun factor. Originality. If we were to take a ride in a time machine to the year 2000, we would see Superman the Ride as the greatest hits compilation of other Intamin coasters. This ride is like a mix of Millennium Force, Superman, Ride of Steel, and Goliath at Wallaby Holland. Superman the Ride takes all the best aspects of those coasters and combine it into one great hypercoaster. The airtime hills and first drop look very similar to Ride of Steel, while the overbanked turns look like it was stolen right out of Millennium Force playbook. The Spaghetti Bowl section is kind of like a mashup of the Helix on Goliath and Ride of Steel, but with its own take. Comparing this coaster to Superman Ride of Steel, this is obviously the better version. There is no pointless straight track like on Ride of Steel. This roller coaster is action-packed from beginning to end. The most bland section of the ride is right after the overbanked turn. The ride does a slight turn to the left, followed by a small bunny hop, but with the added fake buildings that were created during the Bizarro transformation, the ride experience is improved. Personally, I think this coaster's layout still holds up today and deserves a 10 rating. Ride smoothness. For being 19 years old, Superman is still a rather smooth ride. It does have a rattle that pops up every now and then, and that final helix seems to be a tad rough, but again, none of these aspects are deal breakers. This coaster isn't butter smooth, but it doesn't have to be either. I think some of the ride's roughness adds character to the attraction and enhances the overall aggressiveness of the coaster. This ride has aged gracefully. And honestly, comparing this to my 2018 ride on Millennium Force, I'd say this ride is smoother, though that opinion might change when I visit the park again this year. Superman gets a score of 8 for ride smoothness. Alright, the final score comes to 9.2, which is an excellent score. Superman the Ride is considered one of the best steel coasters in the world, and I definitely see why. It has speed, airtime, great positive Gs. It's basically everything you'd want in a hyper coaster. It's unfortunate that the restraints really affect the ride experience, but I think it's more of a negative for taller riders. Six Flags New England has a fantastic 1-2 punch with Superman the Ride and Wicked Cyclone. As long as the park continues to take care of this legendary coaster, Superman the Ride will continue to entertain guests for many years to come. My personal score is going to be a 9.5. and I just can't give this ride a perfect 10 rating because of the restraints. A roller coaster shouldn't deliver quote unquote bad rides, and unfortunately, if you are stapled, prepare to experience some pain. What's good though is regardless if you are stapled or not, you are still gonna experience some airtime. Superman the Ride is one of those roller coasters that I could just sit over by the Spaghetti Bowl area and watch the coaster fly by all day long. This is an event coaster that should be on every coaster enthusiast list. If you haven't been to Six Flags New England, make the trip. This coaster alone makes the trip worth it, and that's not even considering Wicked Cyclone. Alright, that's my review of Superman the Ride. Let me know what you think of this legendary coaster in the comments below. I want to hear your experience, good or bad. As always, please subscribe so you don't miss out on more great content coming your way by X Scream Thrills.